Hello, this is Dylan Miller on Daily Dose Dylan, Google Podcast, Spotify, Spreaker, or iHeartRadio. This is Dylan Miller on Daily Dose Dylan. Alright, we got some good stuff today. Pretty good balance between NFL and NBA. Alright, let's get into it. Alright. So, what do I want to start off with? I think I'll start off with Cooper Flagg, the 17-year-old phenom. He was asked who he would put in his all-time NBA starting five. Thought his list was pretty accurate. He had Magic at point guard, Jordan at shooting guard, Kobe Bryant at small forward, LeBron at power forward, and Kareem at center. It's pretty... I almost exactly what I would have. I have two different answers to that question whenever I get asked what my all-time starting five is. Because there's the one where I just simply put... There's the one where I just simply put the best player at each position of all time. And there's the one that I think would actually work best together as a team. So if you ask me an all-time starting five and I gave you an answer based on the best all-time at each position, it would be, I think Magic's the best point guard ever. Jordan, best shooting guard. LeBron, best small forward. Tim Duncan, power forward. And I think Kareem's the best center of all time. So that would be my answer. That would be my first answer. But if I was considering, like, how a team would work out together, like, a good balance of shooting, passing, and scoring, I would put Steph at point guard because I think LeBron can kind of be that point forward that he's been throughout pretty much his entire career. So there wouldn't be much of a need for Magic Johnson. Steph at point. I would put Jordan at shooting guard for kind of our offense. He's our two-way guy. Jordan will be the two-way guy, offense and defense. He would have the main scoring load. LeBron at the 3, Jordan at the 2, Steph at the 1. Then power forward, I would still pick Tim Duncan for his specialty in rebounding. And then center, I mean, we already have rebounding, defense, scoring, shooting. We have a distributor in LeBron. So center can really be any of the top 5 centers ever. Like I said, I think Kareem's the best. So really the only change I would make is I would replace Magic with Steph. Just because it would add shooting. Like, if you got Magic, Jordan, LeBron, Tim Duncan, and Kareem, like, yeah, it's great. You got defense, you have rebounding from Tim Duncan, and you have scoring from Jordan, but, like, none of them can shoot. None of them have a three-point shot, right? Like, Kareem made, I think Kareem made 1 3 in his career. Tim Duncan was never a shooter. Jordan was never a three-point shooter. LeBron's never really been a great three-point shooter. And there's Magic, who is mainly a passer, so I would, if I were building a team that would work best together, I would put Steph in instead of Magic, as opposed to if I were just putting each of the best all-time at their position, I would have Magic at point. But yeah, I mean, his starting five is pretty accurate. Like I said, he still has Magic and Jordan at the 1 and 2. He still has Kareem at center. The only difference is he put LeBron at power forward and Kobe at the 3, which is interesting. It works. I mean, he still has scoring from Kobe and Jordan, but that's going to be a problem there because Kobe and Jordan, they don't really pass, right? But that's made up for with Magic Johnson. He can be more the distributor. The main difference with them is who's shooting, right? Like, Magic can't shoot. Kobe was never a big three-point guy. He might be their best, honestly. of the 5 people on that team, he's probably the best option. Because, Jordan was never great at shooting the three. Bron's never been great. Kareem made 1 3-pointer in his whole career, so... I'm repeating myself, I apologize, but that's the main difference, right? Like... There is more than one way to answer that question of the all-time starting 5 in the NBA. Alright. So, I'm going to talk about the Cowboys again, because why not? I talk about them a lot, and, they make the news a lot, so it's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, like I said, I know I criticize the Cowboys a lot, but they've had the same story for the last, 10, 15 years. As long as they've been alive, the Cowboys have had the same story every year. They do very well in the regular season, 12-win team, 11-win team. They get to the playoffs and they collapse completely. So, it's hard for me to be... I try to be as positive as possible, right? They are a great regular season team. I think Dak Prescott is a solid quarterback who's going to get paid this year. And that's a story I'm covering. Dak kind of said that the contract negotiations will take care of themselves. And listen, he's a solid quarterback. His main problem is he has, the Cowboys with Dak Prescott in the last 3 years. Everyone loves pointing out that, they have 12 wins each of the last 3 years. Yeah, they also have 1 playoff win in the last three years. They're 1-3 in the playoffs the last 3 years. So even if they're 36-15, which is fantastic in the regular season, the past 3 years, 1-3 in the playoffs kind of trumps that, right? So Dak, he's solid, and with the money, most of them are getting, most of the quarterbacks are getting. I think Dak is worth probably $40 million a year. He might be able to negotiate himself to high $40 million. I would not pay him if he asked for $50 million. I'm saying no. And I get that Trevor Lawrence is getting that money and Jalen Hurts is, but I'm going to talk about Trevor Lawrence in a second, but Jalen Hurts has at least made a Super Bowl, right? Dak, his best, it's almost the furthest he went has been his rookie year, pretty much. That's been his most successful season. Not from a stat line standpoint, but from how far you go in the season. And I hate to use what's happened with the team when I'm talking about an individual player, but you want to have a quarterback that you have success with. And with the Cowboys, they do have... It's not like the Chargers where you pretty much have had... Where Herbert has pretty much had no weapons, right? I mean, at least in that case even, Herbert had Keenan Allen. So more often than not, quarterbacks have a better situation than most people say. Lamar Jackson probably had less of a dynamic offense than Herbert had, because at least he had a number 1 receiver. With the Ravens offense, the number 1 receiver is has been pretty much Mark Andrews the past few years. But listen, Goff is making $53 million. He has the opportunity to make $53 million a year. $42 million of that is guaranteed. And I would trust Goff more than Prescott in the playoffs. Goff, like I said this about the Packers and the Lions. They were both pretty damn close to beating the Niners, who took the Chiefs to overtime in the Super Bowl. So, Jared Goff and the Lions, I put them in my 5 favorites for the season, the upcoming season. Right? I think the Lions can very well, it might not even be an upset by the time we get to the NFC Championship. It might just be expected that the Lions, depending on how the season goes, it might be expected that the Lions beat the Niners. You never know. But yeah, Jared Goff, is a quarterback the Lions are comfortable. They know they can win with him. The same can't be said about the Cowboys with Dak. And it could be. I will say it can't be. You can't say he doesn't have weapons. He has CeeDee Lamb, Michael Gallup. He's had a great offense. Tony Pollard was a pretty good running back until he left. Obviously, he's had a good old line for a while. Micah Parsons on the defense. So you can't say he hasn't really had opportunities to bring them far. And that's the main thing is, like, talking about individuals in team sports is tough, but, like, when you're in Dak's position, he's had weapons, right? He's had defenses in the past. You can blame Mike McCarthy if you want to, but when it comes to contract negotiations, you have to look at the facts, and that's that they haven't made it to an NFC championship with Dak. They haven't been competitive with him. So you can't pay him the same money that Jalen Hurts is getting paid. You shouldn't pay him more than Mahomes is being paid. But, he puts up good numbers. He's coming off his best year, stats-wise. So he'll get paid. I just don't think he should be paid crazy money, because that's kind of what got the Cowboys in this salary cap hole to begin with. All right, so I told you I would talk about Trevor Lawrence and his crazy contract. He did say on a podcast that he thinks this is the best Jags team since he got there, and I know he's trying to be positive, but there's not much competition in that area. Right, he hasn't really had any good team. He did make the playoffs with the Jags, which was impressive. But even then, the roster wasn't exactly fantastic on paper. But listen, Trevor Lawrence, I think he shows a lot of promise. He had a bit of a slump last year, but I think he's still... I think the Jags and the Texans this year are going to have a fight for first in that division. The Texans are the team I'm leaning towards as far as who's going to be first in that division. I think the Jags are going to have to settle for second. But yeah, Trevor Lawrence, he's very talented. I think he saved the Jags, to be honest with you, because I think what people forget is that the Jags were thinking about moving their team before Lawrence got there, and then he brought them to the playoffs with Doug Peterson as the coach, and it all turned around. So, Trevor Lawrence, he's getting more money than he deserves. There's no getting around that. But when you look at the impact he's had on that franchise since he got there, it makes a little more sense. All right, let's shift to Jayden Daniels in Washington. He says he hopes to change the culture. And listen, I think Washington's roster is better than most people think. But that's not saying much, because most people think that Washington's roster has no one. I think Jayden Daniels, he has a very Lamar Jackson feel. He's probably going to be he's going to be very inaccurate his first year. Kind of like Lamar and Josh Allen were 50% completion percentage quarterbacks in their first year. So even if he struggles accuracy-wise, you have to look at... I think he's going to... What I'm saying is I think he's going to show some flashes of being a star, but he's not going to... On paper, it's not going to look that way. His stats are going to kind of show a mediocre quarterback at best, but I think he's better than... He's going to be better than the stats show this year. And I think Washington could be in for third in the division, assuming Dallas and Philly... assuming Philly becomes Philly again, and Dallas kind of stays the same. It should be third in the division for Washington, but They should be on the way up, is what I'm trying to get at. Alright, let's shift to basketball. So Jaylen Brown was snubbed from the Olympic team after Kawhi Leonard dropped out. He was replaced with Derek White as opposed to Jaylen Brown, which is a little perplexing. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. And listen, I've spoken highly of Derek White. I think he's a tremendous role player. He's not a star. He didn't win Finals MVP like Jaylen Brown did. So it is a little weird that Derek White got the Olympic after Kawhi Leonard was taken off the Olympic team, which was apparently the coaching staff's decision. Can't speak today. When Kawhi Leonard got taken off, it's weird that they didn't look to the Finals MVP and instead said, "Oh, Derek White, 15 points a game. We want him." It's not. I don't know. It's interesting. That's what I'll say. It's probably the best way I can think of saying that. And you look at the '92 Olympic team, the Dream Team, where Isaiah Thomas was snubbed, but that was an easy explanation, right? Like, people didn't like Isaiah Thomas at that time. After the whole walking off the court thing. No one wanted to play with him at that time. But, in this case, there's nothing Jaylen Brown really did that comes to mind that people wouldn't want to play with him at all. And, so it's hard. I can't really think of why that happened. But even with Derek White there, I do think, I don't think you can really compare. You can't compare which team is better, the Dream Team or this one, because it's two completely different eras. But if you look so the '90s was a more defensive era, right? So the Dream Team, they had Pippen's defense. Pippen was the best perimeter defender of that era, probably the best perimeter defender ever. Jordan was also a great defensive player. He won Defensive Player of the Year in, I think, 87, I want to say, or 88. So they had Pippen and Jordan, great defenders. And also it didn't hurt that Jordan was by far the best offensive player of that time. And 92, even though everyone looks at the 96 Bulls, I think the 92 Bulls were actually a little bit better, because I think that's when Jordan and Pippen were at their athletic peaks. But yeah, I mean, what does hold them back is, I think the Olympic team in 92 looks a little better on paper than it actually was, because people often forget Larry Bird in 92 was beaten up. He had he already had the back problem was already hindering him in the 1990 season. 2 years later, it wasn't much better. I'll tell you that. And Magic, he was on the decline as well. So it looks great when you see Magic and Bird on the same team as Jordan, but Magic and Bird were out of their primes. They weren't in their prime like most of the people on Team USA this year are. And listen, also, in this era, size mattered a little bit more. I want to say a little bit more than it does today. I mean, today's focus is more on athleticism and offense than it is on the defense and the paint. But in an era where you needed people in the paint playing defense, they had Patrick Ewing and David Robinson. So the Dream Team, they had all they needed to be a dominant Olympic team, but like I said, I think it did look a little better on paper than it was because of Magic and Bird being out of their prime. And that's kind of where this team would kind of get the edge. But listen, we haven't even seen them play. It is possible that they get upset. And then it's like, well, I guess they weren't anywhere near the 92 Olympic team. But listen, on this one, it is actually a little similar. Like, on paper, in a few years, it's going to be like, oh, you had LeBron, KD, Anthony Davis, Anthony Edwards, Jason Tatum. You always got on the same team. But then it's like, well, LeBron and KD, they're still great. Don't get me wrong. I would say LeBron and KD right now are better than Bird and Magic were in the 92 season because they were hindered by injuries. But yeah, it's not much different. Like, it's going to look better on paper than it actually was because LeBron's not the defender he once was. He still averages 25 points, but he's not as dynamic a scorer as he was in his earlier days, Same goes for Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant, I think, is one of the best scorers ever. But, he has a slight decline. So, these teams are very similar. They do have some players that are great, but out of their prime. And then they have some players that are great and in their prime. So, I think both teams are very similar in different eras. Like I said a few days ago, it's more of a modernized version of the Dream Team. But yeah, I mean, like, Edwards is in his prime, Tatum, Anthony Davis. It would be great if we could have Luka or it is interesting. The top 3 players in the league are all international. So, like Jokic, Luka, and Giannis, we don't get the top 3 players in the NBA on our team. But yeah, both these teams are I think going to be equal in dominance. All right, I'm going to have one baseball segment today, just because I feel like I could. So the Phillies continued their dominance. And I mean, listen, baseball's such a long season, it's hard to make a call, but at this moment, the Phillies are the best team in baseball. They just had a 3-game sweep of the Dodgers. And with the Dodgers and Yankees falling off so much, it kind of opens the door for the Orioles, Guardians, and Phillies to kind of show that they are currently the better teams right now, right? And the way the Phillies dominated this past week, I think they proved they are the best team in the NL, probably the best team in the league. Right, because the Dodgers series against the Yankees, we saw the Dodgers were a better team, and then the Phillies go against the Dodgers, and they show, well, we're better than both, right? And yes, some of it is the injuries the Dodgers have had, but even Dave Roberts came out after the game and said, yeah, the Phillies are a better team right now. They overpowered us, right? They were just better in almost every aspect. Pitching, hitting, just overall fielding. The Phillies were a better baseball team in that series. And right now, they are the best team in baseball, but, I mean, we haven't even reached 100 games yet, so it's very possible a lot changes, because there's still over 62 games to be played. So I guess we'll see, but right now, the Phillies, they're on a hot streak, and that series against the Dodgers was their defining moment right there. All right, we're going to shift back to football. Matt Eberflus has been impressed with Caleb Williams at camp. And listen, like I said, Caleb Williams, I think he's going to be very talented. I think he's going to be a great quarterback. But we can't make any major calls yet, right? It's looking good for the Bears, it is. But I'm not going to make any crazy calls saying, oh, he's going to be the next CJ Stroud and bring them to the playoffs, right? He could. They have the ingredients to do that. Keenan Allen, DJ Moore. They added DeAndre Swift, which isn't exactly an amazing running back, but better than they had. They still have a good defense, great defensive coach. So he could have very early success, but it's also going to be tough. The division, they still have the Packers, who are a formidable opponent, and the Lions, who I think are a Super Bowl contender this year. So that's 4 tough games in the season. Then the Vikings might be surprising to most people. They do still have Justin Jefferson, TJ Hawkinson, and their quarterback situation is kind of a question mark right now, but we'll see what they do. But yeah, the Bears, things are looking up for them. The only downside is the division they're in. Alright, so Davante Adams came out a few days ago saying that Aaron Rodgers is still in his ear about a potential reunion between the two. And I have no idea which way that would go if Rodgers goes to the Raiders, which I don't think he will. But it would make sense. Rodgers is a California. He grew up in California, so it's very possible. But I think it's more likely Davante Adams comes to the Jets, since they're in a better spot than the Raiders by a lot. So a reunion between the two would be interesting. I do still blame Aaron Rodgers for Davante Adams leaving. Because listen, if sorry, Rodgers was so I don't even know what the right word is, but he just kept. He kept being asked about retirement, and every time he was like, "Oh, I don't know, maybe I'll retire this year, maybe in 5 years." You have to give a more thorough answer to that. I think the reason Adams left is because he didn't think that Rodgers would be there for longer than that. Would he probably thought Rodgers would retire by this year, and he hasn't. If Rodgers was just upfront about that, they could have extended Davante Adams, and he could still be on the Packers, but he's not. So I still blame Aaron Rodgers for Davante Adams leaving in the first place. But it looks like they're going to reunite on the Jets, so isn't that lovely? Alright, so Tyreek Hill, he named his top 5 quarterbacks in the league, he said right off the bat, Mahomes, big surprise, Tua, and Lamar. Then he took a pause and said Dak and Baker. Tyreek Hill is a fantastic receiver. He's not a general manager, and this kind of showcases why. Tua, I like Tua a lot. I could probably make a case for him being top 10. But top 5 is kind of pushing it. Same thing with Dak and Baker. Tua, Dak, and Baker are actually in very similar positions as far as quarterback rankings go. Where they're kind of... They might be top 10, but definitely not top 5. They are not among the best. Because... I think the top 5 is... I think everyone would agree, or most people would agree. The top 5 in no order are Mahomes, Allen, Herbert, Burrow, and Lamar. So you got Mahomes, who obviously 3 Super Bowls, 3 MVPs. Then you got Lamar, 2-time MVP. Josh Allen, probably the most talented guy in the league. Joe Burrow has been to a Super Bowl. And Justin Herbert, who showed a lot of talent, but just hasn't had that big jump to the playoffs. Right, so I think the top 5, and I think most people would agree Mahomes is number 1, but 2 to 5 is very interchangeable. Allen, Lamar, Herbert, Burrow, those guys you can shift their rankings however you want. My personal opinion, I would probably say Allen at 2, Lamar 3, Burrow 4, and Herbert 5. That's how I look at it, but that's definitely, you can change that easily. All right, so Anthony Edwards said he was very much nervous ahead of his first Olympic exhibition. I mean, that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, I think part of Anthony Edwards' appeal is that he is very honest, which, I think attracts you more than the people that try to say, oh, I didn't care much about this. They try to pretend that the Olympic exhibition had no pressure on them. It definitely did. It's the Olympics. It's a big deal. Even being invited as part of the team is a big deal. Right? So, I think Anthony Edwards will eventually be the face of the league just because, being the face of the league includes more than being the best player. I wouldn't say Kareem was the face of the league when he played, even though he was, he was the best player, but he hardly spoke, so he wasn't really the face of the league, Magic and Bird were when they came on the scene, they were the face of the league. Jordan was the face of the league, right? And then I would say Shaq for a bit. Then you kind of had that weird Tim Duncan, Kobe era, where I would say Kobe was the face of the league. But there were definitely years that Tim Duncan was better. But, Anthony Edwards, he's easy to root for. Luka, I think Luka is better. And I think Jokic is better. But they're just not... Jokic, he looks at the NBA as more of a job. So, can't say he's a great face of the league material. I do think he's the best in the league. And Luka kind of wears you down with how much he complains to the refs and all that. So, I would say next year we're looking at Jokic, the best player in the league. But Edwards kind of the face of it. The likable, talented player. Alright, so Josh Jacobs came out and criticized the Raiders losing culture and said that's what contributed to him leaving, which, in all honesty, makes a lot of sense. I mean, going from Alabama, who pretty much only win, to the Raiders, who have done nothing but lose for the past, 40 years. Huge culture shock. I thought it was interesting that Green Bay added him and got rid of Aaron Jones. Josh Jacobs is a bit younger, so there's that kind of appeal, but I thought Aaron Jones was a very good part of the offense as a check down back. I thought he was very critical to Jordan Love's development. So I did find it a little weird that we got rid of him and got Jacobs. But what that's going to tell me is that that's telling me that the Packers believe Jordan Love is past that kind of beginner check down stuff. It's telling me Jordan Love can now just sling it to any of his three options. Like Jaden Reed, Christian Watson. He can sling it to any of them. He doesn't have to do a check down to Aaron Jones anymore. He can just hand it to Josh Jacobs and let him do his thing on some plays. So I think it's a good thing, or it's just... I mean, it's hard for me to believe that Green Bay made a bad move on the offensive side. I mean, listen, their defense hasn't been great. I will say that. But their offense, they've been pretty much flawless in how they pick their offense, right? I mean, we go from Favre to Rodgers to now it looks like Jordan Love. I'm not going to say Jordan Love is the next Aaron Rodgers or Brett Favre, but he seems to be in position to be another successful quarterback from Green Bay. So all the offensive moves we made in the past, decade and a half, they've been pretty much right. So I can't say they're wrong for picking Josh Jacobs and dropping Aaron Jones. All right, so Najee Harris spoke about Pittsburgh, saying there are good things coming this year. And listen, the big thing about the AFC is there's so many good teams Like, I can't really think of many AFC teams that I'm negative about. Right, the Pittsburgh, they always have a great defense. Mike Tomlin always manages to make them a winning team. Russell Wilson is definitely an upgrade from Kenny Pickett. I think their roster is great, to be honest with you, on paper. We'll see how their offense does, but I think they have a great roster overall on paper. And they should do very well. The problem is, not only are they in the AFC, which is just a bear to get through, with the Chiefs, Ravens, Bengals, the Dolphins are looking good this year. If Rodgers stays healthy, the Jets might even be coming on the scene. And now the Texans, they won a playoff game last year. They seem to be on the rise with C.J. Stroud. There's just so many good teams in the AFC. But also with the Steelers, they're in a division with the Bengals and Ravens. That's 4 tough games a year. And if they don't win 2 of those, it's going to be hard for them to compete for a playoff spot. Right? So, they have what they need to be a good team, but I have no idea if they will be. I don't know if their record's going to show how good they are on paper. All right, so the last segment today. Ja'Marr Chase is waiting on an extension. He's probably going to be the next. I would guess he'll be the next receiver to get paid the big money. I'm pretty sure I know that Justin Jefferson's contract extension is going to have a major impact on what these other receivers like CeeDee Lamb and Ja'Marr Chase are asking for, right? Because in their mind, they're comparable to Justin Jefferson, which they are. Ja'Marr Chase, when he's healthy, is right up there with Jefferson as one of the top receivers. And it doesn't hurt that he has Joe Burrow with him. So, him and Burrow healthy is going to be... I think the Bengals are going to be pushing for the Super Bowl again. With both of them healthy. Some people seem to disagree, but... Yeah, I think they're going to be first in their division. I do think they're slightly better than the Ravens. We'll see what happens, As far as the contract, I assume Chase is going to get maybe a little less. I mean, because the thing with the Vikings is they're not paying a big-time quarterback either, right? They don't have a Joe Burrow on their team. So, the Bengals are going to have to pay Joe Burrow and Ja'Marr Chase. So Chase is definitely going to get less money than Jefferson has. I don't think it's going to be a big gap, though, between the two. So, all right, that was it for today. Seems like a solid almost 40 minutes. So, all right. Good stuff today. Next week, I think Tuesday through Friday, we should be looking at podcasts. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Monday, a little iffy. But if I don't get one in Monday, I'll get one in, I'll do it, when I do a double podcast almost, where it's over an hour. So yeah, that's what I'll do if I miss a podcast Monday. I'll do a double one on Tuesday, then Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I'll be back at it. So, alright, this was Dylan Miller on Delito Stillin. Spotify, Spreaker, or iHeartRadio. This was Dylan Miller on Delito Stillin. Have a good day. I will see you Tuesday.